So here's what you need to know to shoot like a professional photographer with only your iPhone. I'm using the 12 Pro. If you have the 13 or 14 Pro, you're gonna have very similar settings to what we're gonna go over in this video. Or if you just have a regular iPhone, there's also value in this video for you too, so stick around. Before the end of the video, you'll be able to turn your photos from something like this into something like this. I've also provided a free preset in the description today just as a thank you for being here, and what it is a film emulation preset. So it's going to turn your iPhone process looking images into a little bit more filmic style. It's crazy to think where iPhones have come in recent years in terms of just the sheer power that the cameras have. So in today's video, I just want to make sure you're making the most out of your iPhone in terms of the cameras with settings and composition, and then we'll do a little bit of editing at the end in Lightroom. And for the purposes of this video, I hit up Chinatown in Victoria, BC, where I live, and I just wanted to see if the iPhone 12 Pro or 13 or 14 for that matter can replace your mirrorless camera for day-to-day use for photos, because we know it's a whole lot more compact. So I'm screen recording right now, and what I'd like everyone to do is just follow along with me. You can either copy my settings or you can create your own and tweak them as you wish. But first, let's go to settings. We're going to go all the way down to camera, and then we're going to click formats first. Under formats, what I like to do is click high efficiency, and high efficiency is going to save us storage, a little bit of space. And right now I just have 128 gigabytes, so sometimes that does come into play. And then I like to turn on Apple Pro RAW, or at least have that option. And what Pro RAW does is shooting in RAW gives us more information in the picture, but it costs us space, 25 megabytes if we're shooting in Pro RAW, or up to 70 megabytes if we're using 48 megapixels on the iPhone 14 Pro. So when we shoot RAW, it gives us a lot more information in our image. And that's good, because if we want to edit that later, it's really easy to recover exposure settings, particularly underexposed. So if there's dark spots in the images, in the shadows, it's really easy to recover that if we shot it in RAW, rather high efficiency JPEG. Super quick, if I'm providing any value for you or you're learning anything new, if you could just leave a like, it goes a really long way in helping my channel get noticed. Let's dive back in. So if I go back now, those were our formats. I'm gonna go down. Don't worry about video so much. We can discuss that in another video. But if you go down to preserve settings, I like to keep all of these on. And what this does is just keeps consistency within our shooting. So camera mode, this just makes sure that, you know, when you swipe, you have time-lapse video, slow motion, photo. This just puts it back to where you were last time. Exposure adjustment, as a lot of you guys know, when you click and hold, if you go up and down, you can manually change the exposure settings. We'll talk about it later in the video, but this will just preserve what your last exposure manually was, and I like to do this. Oftentimes the lighting will change in the scene, so we can just go up and down a little bit, but for the most part, it stays pretty consistent if you're on a shoot. So when I was in Chinatown, I was oftentimes underexposing my image for what my iPhone thought, and that gives me better results in editing. Night mode, portrait zoom, that Pro RAW, yes, I like to make sure that Pro RAW is on. There's nothing worse than you're like, I really like this image, I want to be able to edit it in post, and it kicks off because the camera, it wasn't preserved. So that RAW, you thought it was on, but it actually shot in a lesser quality. So that always sucks. And then live photo I keep on, because oftentimes when I'm shooting live photo, I'll go back and you can change it to like long exposure, and that gives you really cool results in post. So you didn't even think about the shutter speed during, but after you can get like really cool streaky blurred lines. We can talk a little bit about that too. One thing to note is if we're shooting RAW, unfortunately we don't have the live option. So we can't change it to bounce, or we can't change it to long exposure after the fact. So let's go back. That was preserve settings. And the next one is composition. Camera composition is simply where you choose to put things in your frame. So where does the dog go? Where does the building go? And that's completely up to you. That's the creative side of photography. But something that can help is the rule of thirds. So I like to keep that grid on. And then that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 intersecting lines. And oftentimes you put your subject in those intersecting lines. We can talk about that a little bit later. Scene detection, prioritize, yeah, sure, but I'm not going to talk about those. I leave them on. Okay, lens correction. We have a wide angle lens on our phone, and that super wide sometimes distorts our image. So by turning on lens correction, it's going to fix some of that distortion. So I like to keep that on. And last one is smart HDR. And HDR stands for high dynamic range. So essentially what's happening there is your camera is doing all the work for you, but it's taking different shots at different exposures and then blending it all together to make sure you have a lot of information there and exposed properly in the mountains in the back and then in the foreground with the person. So it has good exposure for the depth of the image. All right, so here I am in the camera app, and you see at this top right corner, you see I can toggle raw on and off. That is gonna preserve so whatever you shot on last. So that's kind of cool. And then this here is live mode. And you see when I click live, what's happening is the raw is kicking on and off. So remember, we can't shoot raw with this live function. So live off, raw is on. I oftentimes, if I want to edit the picture, this is how I'm going to shoot. So let's start in 0.5. I'm going to teach you first the focus. So you simply tap to focus where you want. And you see that my exposure changes based on what's in focus. So if we want to make sure that our exposure settings aren't jumping around on us and the camera's doing the work and we want to do it, we simply tap and hold. And by doing this, we get an autofocus lock. This autofocus lock is good, but remember, it's the distance that you're away from the subject that's actually going to change the focus. So yeah, you're locked in here if I took a picture, but if I get closer to the camera and you see that square that's supposed to be in focus, since I focused it back here, it's going to be in focus from that distance. But if I get closer, I'm going to lose that focus and I'm going to need to get out of this and refocus and relock. Now if I go away from that, again, I've lost that Sony in focus and I need to change my focus again. So that's super important. It's the distance that you're away. Okay, now that everyone understands focus, let's talk a little bit about exposure. So this is pretty easy. What you want to do is you want to line up your composition. So, oh, I think the picture looks good like this. I like to click and hold to make sure I'm not losing focus, and then I can drag down. And what I like to do is see the lighting in the background on the right or even on my screen. It's like the brightest part of the image. So what I like to do is expose for that, because remember, when we're shooting in RAW, we're going to get so much of those shadows, the dark parts of the image, which is all here. We're going to be able to get that back in editing. Now, if we didn't shoot in RAW, then unfortunately those dark parts are going to be really hard to recover. So just bear that in mind. Yes, you can expose manually. Don't overexpose. It's difficult to get back. It's better to underexpose. Lastly, what we're going to do is I'm going to give away that preset. So make sure you have Lightroom downloaded onto your phone. And I'm going to be going over just some basic exposure settings and then also teach you guys how to download that film emulation preset to make your iPhone photos look a little bit more like film. All right, so here we are in Lightroom. I'm quickly going to show you, this is the film emulation, and that's the original photo that I took from the iPhone 12 Pro. So let's go to the original, and this might be your first time in Lightroom, so there's light settings. What I like to do on most of my images that are landscape or even city shots is I like to take my highlights, bring them down. You can see in the sign here, that Victoria barbecue house. You can bring that down a bit. And then shadows, I like to bring them up. So all those dark spots in the image kind of gives it a different look, but I like to bring that up a little bit to get back some of that information because we shot it in RAW. Whites, you can kind of see what happens here, but look at the sign. Changes the exposure a lot on the sign. So typically I like to reduce my whites a little bit, and then crushed blacks is a look that a lot of people like. I'm just going to leave for this image around the middle because I think that looks pretty good. And last thing that I'll teach you is color. So you have two things that I just wanted to show you. Is number one is your color temperature. So you get a whole lot warmer if you go to the right and a whole lot cooler like your blues if you go to the left. So I like it where we had it. And then last thing is tint. So it's either green or magenta. So green is actually a staple of like more filmic looks, but you don't want to overdo it. Like this is overdone. So you got to find the spot. And then if you go to pink, you can see that just the saturation looks way off there. So for me, I'll just leave it around 0 because I already had it to where I wanted with this preset. All right, so let's get you this film emulation preset that I've promised you. So I want you guys to go to Safari. You can also go to Google Chrome. I have 2 files here, one to the right with no image. This is for your desktop. So if you want to install it on your laptop or desktop, you can do that. But on the left here, if you want to just install it through Lightroom Mobile and you don't want to use a computer at all, click the image, .dng file. Doesn't look edited, but I promise the information is there. So in the top right, we're going to click download. Then it's going to ask us, do you want to download this? We're going to go download. In the bottom left, we can see our downloads folder. I've downloaded it a few times here, but I'm going to click it. And now we have the edited version, but we need to take it a step further. Bottom left, we're going to export it. Where do we export it to? Lightroom. And it's going to say the shared photo will be imported on the next app launch. Well, let's do that now. So launch Lightroom now. Once you're there, it's going to say 1 photo successfully added. So let's click it. And you can see that the information from the raw and the edit is there. So what you're going to do is the top right corner, we're going to click the 3 dots, create preset. You can call it whatever you want. And then press the check mark in the top right. I'm not going to do it because I've already saved this. And then you can use this preset here on any of your future images for film emulation. Hope that helps. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel. I hope you learned at least one new thing about your iPhone in terms of photography, and we will see you in the next one. Matty out. Peace.